welcome to another edition of the Paranormal Zone, where we look at the paranormal from different views, from Wiccan to paranormal to Bigfoot, cryptozoology. We look at it from different views. Today we're going to have a very interesting show. Today we're going to talk about the expansion of Essex County. We've always had a UFO on, but we're really getting into it now. Bob's going to be the head of the UFO end of this. So, welcome, Bob. How are we doing today?
Thanks, Tom.
All right. So, Bob, how do you want to get moving on this today?
Well, let's start off by making sure that our listeners in the local area at least remember that we have the Sandown Train Depot event this Saturday night, 7 to 9, Sandown, New Hampshire. Everybody is welcome. We hope the weather's going to be good. I looked at long-range weather, and it looks like it's going to be a really pleasant evening. So come on down, talk to Essex County Ghost Project people. You can talk to me, talk to Tom, and plus you get to see an actual investigation from 3 different perspectives. So, again, that's Saturday. This coming Saturday, the 12th, 7 to 9, Sandown, New Hampshire, at the Sandown Train Depot. If you need more information or anything like that, you can contact us at Paranormal NH, all one word, no caps, at yahoo.com. So I know, Tom, we're going to have a great event that night, so I hope we see a lot of people.
I do, too. I think we're going to have a real fun event. I'm looking forward to it this week because the weather's going to be nice.
Yeah.
The weather's going to be real nice, great. So that's even better.
Yeah, right. It is. But it's still going to be nighttime, so the sun will be down. You probably want to wear a sweatshirt or a jacket or something because it might be a little on the cool side.
Correct. Just a little.
Yeah. Well, as far as the UFO side of this goes, you and I have been talking for a number of years about this, and I think, Tom, with all of the interest and the sightings that are going on, especially in New England, about UFOs. Now, we know that some of the reports can be explained, just like the paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
They could be drones, they could be satellites, just making their turn. But one of the things that I think we've looked at over the years is the fact that people see a UFO, and the first thing they do after they come out of a period of shock is they try to ascertain what is that. One of the things we're not good at doing is using technology to track this stuff. For example, most people today have an iPhone.
Correct.
The first thing you want to do when you see any kind of an object like that is to film it. That's the very first thing, because if you can capture that on film, we can then go back and look at it from different angles and blow it up and so forth to see what it is. If you look at, cameras today, because of iPhones, technology, regular straight lens cameras are really cheap today. I mean, you're buying them for almost nothing. And I think that what has to happen is that people in general have to be trained on how to capture this kind of evidence. So what we're looking at doing is to come in with a group of people, somewhere between 6 and 8 to start with, where we would have investigators in the field that could take a report over the phone to start with, and then go out, document the report, do whatever investigation they can at the time. For example, Bill was saying the other day, if the report was of an abduction, that means that the craft they were taken to was probably stationary or landed somewhere, and would it leave behind radioactive materials? If somebody was abducted and maintains that something was inserted into them somehow, then we'd want to document that scar, that opening, that bruise, whatever it might be. But to have these field investigators go out and actually start to document, track the coordinates of the sightings, if they're not abduction, to coordinate the time, the date, what the weather conditions were, what we were near. For example, were we near any kind of a military base or anything like that? So I think it's getting a team together, but it's training the public how to report these type sightings.
Correct.
And then on top of that, we start to develop a database because we start to look at similarities between the categories. For example, one category is abduction, second category is visitation, the third category really is observation. And usually UFO contact falls into one of the three categories. Of course, abduction being the most invasive, because the stories and the people that you and I have talked to over the years have actually been delivered to a craft of some sort somewhere. They're not sure where. They're not sure what the craft might have been, whether it was stationary, grounded. Observation is the tough one because it's you and I looking up into the sky and we see something we can't identify.
Correct.
And, of course, visitations have become more and more popular in that we're starting to see people now report that they've been visited by an alien, not abducted. So when you start to look at that, you have to break it up into those three categories and then start to train investigators how to handle each category. Develop a database and then start to track similarities. So you talk to a client that was abducted and they tell you 6 things that happened to them. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month later, we talk to another person that was abducted and they tell us 6 things. We compare those 6 points, 8 points, whatever they are, to each other, looking for similarities. And, overall, people say, well, what would that do for you? Well, it might start to put a better picture together for us as to why people are being abducted.
Correct.
You and I and Mike Stevens and the professionals that I've met in this field will tell you that when people are abducted, we really never come out with a clear reason why. There's at least some theories that they're being abducted because this has been a very long-term being thousands of years experiment, back to the Egyptians, experiment on developing human life on this planet. And they're coming back periodically to check the progress of that. Okay. It could be. I wouldn't argue that. There's certainly enough evidence when we go back into, you're a historian, so you've studied this, but when you go back into Egyptian times and pyramids and how did they get built and how were they so perfect, how did these people have this technology? There's scripture on the walls of tombs that show flying objects. We know that the Egyptians at one point early in their culture had multiple gods that they worshipped. But all of these gods are, depicted coming from the heavens.
Right.
So to me, I think that that's what this new arm has to look at. I encourage people out there today, if you have ever had any interest in this at all, don't take it from I'm concerned about what people will think about me, and I don't want to tell people I'm interested in UFOs. Take it from a perspective that we're trying to find the truth. That's what we're looking for. Wherever that truth leads us. Hey, maybe it leads us down a road that they don't exist at all.
Correct.
I don't think so. We see too much evidence, Tom, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, but I'm willing to accept that if in the final analysis of this whole thing, that's what it comes down to, that UFOs don't exist, aliens don't exist. Okay, let's prove it. Let's prove it in, or let's prove it out. So when people like you and I have been doing this for 25 years, but for people that have never done it before, I want to guarantee them that you and I will train them, that it'll be done with respect. They don't have to worry about their identity. If they really want to remain anonymous, they can go on this team and remain anonymous.
Right.
But the biggest thing I think we're looking for with people is dedication. To go out there and do the necessary research. And, this has been going on since the beginning of time. People have donated time and energy and sometimes their lives to find the truth. So I'm excited about it. I think it's a great project. Certainly, I had a gentleman say to me the other day, well, isn't that what MUFON does? And I said, look, MUFON's a great organization. They've been around for years, and they do a great job. And by no means are we trying to compete against MUFON or challenge them in any way. We love to work with them.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, but I hear constantly from people, well, I saw an object, I was abducted, I was visited, but I really don't know where to go.
Right.
So they want to go local. And we, you and I, are going to offer them that advantage of dealing with local people. So,
no, you're right about that, Bob. And we hear it all the time. The other night, I gave a talk at the Havel Public Library, and after the talk was over, we talked about the Canosa Triangle, which is something that I coined myself. And did a lot of research, and there's been some UFO stuff. That's why I'm bringing it into this conversation. Plenty of UFO sightings. And this area pretty much is from Monument Square towards Merrimack, Groveland, Georgetown, Riverside area of Havel, if you're local and you know where you are. In fact, last year we were at the Sandown meeting house last year. I got a call from somebody that saw a UFO fly over while they were getting ready for some Halloween event down there. It was like 6 o'clock at night, if I remember the time correctly. So, I mean, it's seen. A couple of years back, I did this talk. This was revisiting the Canosa Triangle. And a team member brought me pictures from her friend's house off of Giles Street, which is off of 108, heading into New Hampshire. The back way of UFOs right outside her condo. Now, I'm not going to give any where about those condos are because I'm just not going to do that. But that's information that I've stored, gathered, and, putting in a base to find out what else is going on. And, it's great that, we don't do this politically, but sometimes politics does come into the show, okay? And we don't care who you're voting for or anything. We don't care where you stand with anybody. But I have to give credit where credit is due. And I've done this on my own paranormal show on public access TV where you have to be real careful in politics. Okay? But our former president, Donald Trump, signed in the bill that forced the government to come clean about UFOs or UA, whatever they're calling them now. I don't even care. I'm going to call them UFOs. But, we got to push the government more because the original number was like 160 since 1960 when the first numbers came out. I laughed, what off because there's over 160 sightings in Rockingham County alone in 1 year. In southern northern Massachusetts, Essex County, Rockingham County, right up the coast, Pease Air Force, Pease Trade Port, no longer the Air Force Base. But out that way, up the coast, all the way to Portsmouth and beyond, there's over 160 sightings a year. Never mind 160 since 1960. I'm like, okay.
The other thing I find interesting is that the question has been talked about for many times by people much brighter than I am, but it seems to me that the government doesn't want to release any information. And I think that, most of us can kind of rationalize why. They don't want to cause panic. They don't want to cause all this kind of problem. I think it's like a criminal investigation when the DA comes out, doesn't want to give you a lot of information yet because it taints their investigation.
Right.
But it's an interesting question as to why the government doesn't want to come clean with UFOs. And I've heard all kinds of things that the government is working with aliens to, continue technology, and they don't want the public to know that. I've heard they're afraid of panic. I've heard they're afraid that there will be groups that try to make their own contact, and they don't want that to happen. So it seems to me that the government would better serve their own purpose, Tom, if they get out in front of this thing and said, look, let's put this on the table. We believe there's aliens. We believe there's definitely life on other planets. We're willing to admit that we have been contacted. We're willing to admit that. We're not, like any investigation, we're not going to give out any more information than we have to. Because I think that satisfies some people's curiosity, as opposed to those people, Tom, are constantly saying, why won't they? Why won't they? And it just draws more attention. So you would think that the government would come cocoa a little more. I don't know. That's just my take on it,
Right. And I thought when the government started releasing, they've all now put over, they're starting to release more and more information. I'm not sure what the exact number is right now. But they're finally releasing information. But I had discussed this with another person before this and on another show. And you know what I was hoping would come out, if you want my honest opinion? So let's talk about the big one here in New Hampshire, the big one, Benny and Bonnie Hill. Okay, that's one of the big ones. Or the Allagash up in Exeter, or the Allagash, okay? Any one of those. So we know the day. I forgot the exact dates those happened off the top of my head. But, okay, so the day Benny and Bonnie Hill saw that UFO, okay, and had that experience, okay?
Correct.
The day before, the week before, or the day or the week after, were there any more sightings in the area? Or was that just the only, like a one-trick pony, one and done? We're not sure.
Right.
That's what I was looking for. And same with the Exeter, the incident in Exeter, which is really the incident in, I believe it's Kensington, right? It really wasn't Exeter. Exeter police were called in, but it wasn't Exeter proper, or what we consider Exeter today.
Correct.
Were there any other sightings around that time? Now, a couple of years back, well, God, probably longer than a couple of years back. I've probably been on there over 10 years. I keep forgetting how long it's been and how old I am, Bob. I really do. Oh, God. But I used to work in Exeter, and one of the days I was working, the next day, it was a Tuesday, I came in, my schedule was like Monday, Tuesday, Thursday at that time. It was all day, though, so, I mean, it is what it is, and I enjoyed it. I come in the next day, and my boss has got a whole pile of newspapers for me. I always read all the newspapers anyhow, but I kept them. I got to get them out. I forgot where they're located right now. But there was a UFO sighting in Exeter, and then within 20 minutes of that sighting, there was one seen in England. Now, was it the same one? We don't know. But it was seen in broad daylight. A retired U.S. Navy pilot saw it. Now, were there lights the night before? Well, I drove home at 8 o'clock at night. It wasn't that 8, though, probably closer to 9 I got out. It was getting dark because this was still, it was like springtime, I believe, or early fall. Might have been early fall, September, so it was still getting dark a little later. But the night before that, I thought I saw some weird stuff over near, and I'll say this because it's a business, and I saw the map of Exeter where Mike Stevens put out where UFOs have been sighted. So, and this location's on that map, Applecrest Farms. I thought I saw something weird flying over Applecrest Farms that night. The night before, the Tuesday night on my way home. Now, I didn't work Wednesday. I came back Thursday to work, and Wednesday was all the fun at like 3 in the afternoon, I believe it was. So that's what I like to wonder. When these, I was hoping these official reports would say, okay, 2 days before Roswell, there was a sighting over Roswell or in the vicinity of. Same with Exeter. There was a sighting at Hampton Beach or somewhere, Ossipee, or somewhere further inland from Exeter, anywhere out there. It doesn't matter what town it was. Plastow even, I don't even care. But it would be interesting to see if these things are out more than we think they are. And I think they are. Because I've seen
I have two people, obviously I'm not going to tell you where they're from or their names,
Right.
and I know that frustrates our listeners, but that's the kind of anonymity we have to protect people from. So,
Right.
But these two people have been abducted, and frankly, the stories that I've heard would make the Betty and Barney Hill abduction look amateurish, to be honest with you. I'm not going to go into a lot of details. I don't think that's fair to the people that trust me.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm talking about in the last 2 years, at least one of these two people, that they have been abducted at least 2 or 3 times. And when I say abducted, I don't mean they have no memory of what happened to them. I'm talking about a case that they recall being aboard a craft. They recall the beings. They recall what was said to them and what was done to them in detail. But the situation is to support those folks. That's why we need to see, a demographic base of 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 abductees to be able to track this stuff in order to answer why do they do what they do.
Right.
Are they checking on reproduction? Because they need that technology. We know, you and I know at least, that their technology, alien technology, is 1,000 times greater than ours.
That is true. Maybe even more than
right? That. Maybe more than that. There is certainly, when you look at the pyramids, and forget how they were built, look at the pyramids' alignment. I mean, just the alignment. Today, with the technologies of supercomputers that we have, we can't create the pyramids.
No, we can't.
Now, I want our listeners to really sit back, have a cup of coffee, and think about that.
Right.
Thousands of years later, with the technology we have, we cannot, on a computer, or rebuild and recreate the pyramids. Well, then where did that technology come from thousands of years ago? So to me, this group that you and I are trying to get off the ground is much bigger than just investigators interested in UFOs.
Correct.
This is really something I think that certainly MUFON does a very good job at it, and I recognize that on a national basis. But I also recognize that MUFON is also somewhat monitored and controlled maybe by the government. So what I'm looking to do, what you and I think we should do, is to be able to track your experiences, whether you were abducted, you observed, or you were visited. Correct. To start to put together the picture of why.
Right.
Why? I'll give you an example, and I'm talking about evidence. I'm going to tell you 2 examples. I had an individual not too long ago that had x-rays taken. And within the x-rays came 3 metal objects in the pelvic region of the bone. Okay? Doctors, and I was privy to this information, doctors could not ascertain what those 3 metal objects were.
Correct.
But they were absolutely convinced that they were not from a surgical procedure or, screws that were put in to hold bones together that maybe over years broke off. Their answer to me was, we don't know what it is. The only way to find out would be to do an exploratory, and they didn't go that far with this. But I have pictures of that. So when people say, well, I hear a lot of stories like that, but I don't know if it's true. Well, I have the pictures. So
Right.
the only part I'm asking you to believe is the medical answer to what they told me it was. And I would just tell you that it was a personal member of my family, how I ascertained it. The second story is that we know somebody that recently had some medical issues and was told, at least by the medical profession, that they found something they can't explain. Right?
Correct.
Well, here's the thing. If a doctor finds a foreign object of any kind in your body and he can't or she can't explain it, you have a right, a patient's right to the documents, the x-rays, or anything else that's yours from a medical profession. So we need to educate people to that fact, to say, make sure you get all of that information and let us look at that.
Correct.
Because let's say that we had 3 people, 4 people, 30 people that had these kind of metal in their bone areas, then it starts to tell us they're inserting something, maybe. But this is the kind of similarities we need to track, and we need to track over larger groups. Because there is no doubt in my mind, I have another client, if you will, that maintains that this individual knows that there are aliens walking around today here in New Hampshire. I won't give the town, the area that they're telling me, but right here in New Hampshire, and this individual can identify them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean,
now,
we both know
true or false?
Right. But to that word,
Right.
before we continue, Bob, I want to just interject with this real quick. We both know somebody, and you can go back and see this on Monsters and Mysteries of America, the Bridgewater Triangle edition.
Yep.
We both know somebody that, went to the doctor one day and they said, "You're pregnant." And they said, we're not going to say the exact terminology she used. It was a she, obviously. Because I haven't done anything in over 10 months, 12 months. It's been over a year. Well, it was immaculate conception, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I'm not a fan, but I'm not a believer in that. But, she's done everything. She's taking care of herself, doing what she needs to do like a pregnant single mother would do. And then one day she wakes up in the middle of the night in a pool of blood and the baby's gone. Now, she had gone to the doctor, so the doctor knew there was, something in her stomach.
Right.
And she went back, there was nothing in her stomach, and she was, cut open. She actually swears she's seen her kid walking around in different locations.
So the first question you have to ask in this particular case is, did she have a miscarriage? Right? I mean, that's a medical decision, right?
Yeah.
They look and say, yeah, you had a miscarriage.
Right.
If that's ruled out, then the next thing is, what happens to that fetus? I mean, you just don't lose a fetus,
Right.
correct?
Exactly.
But back up again, okay? Again, if we had data that we could track on abductions, for example, is there a sexual component of abductions? If we interviewed 30 people that were abducted and only 2 had any kind of a sexual component to it, then we start to question, well, why didn't the other 28? So not saying the 2 didn't, Tom, but reflecting on the fact that may not be the aliens' main issue with abductions. It may not be a sexual component, or in fact, to recreate themselves through birth with a human, right? It might be something else. That's why gathering this data is so important to us. Because the other scenario is, if we had 30 abductees and 16 of them had a sexual component to this, this may tell us a whole different answer. Right. And it may not just be reproduction. It might not be that. It might be something else.
Right.
This is why we've got to, and I encourage anybody listening to this podcast to send me an email. I'm older than dirt, and I can take it, okay? So send me an email at paranormalnh@yahoo.com and give me your thoughts. There's only one little caveat I have to that. I gave you my direct email, so you can get at me right now. Just do it professionally and understand that everybody has a point of view and an opinion. I don't mind debating and I don't mind discussing. But if you just want to criticize me, unfortunately, you're not going to get what you want because I don't care.
Right, exactly.
I don't have time to deal with people like that.
Right.
But if you want to send me an email, I'm happy to have this discussion with you. If you've been abducted, Tom and I encourage you to get a hold of us. Because right today, because of Tom's efforts over the years, we have a connection with Mike Stevens, who is the more professional expert I've ever met in this field. And Mike Stevens has a support group, and he welcomes and embraces anybody who wants to join his support group. And there are people that have been abducted. That's what's in this group. They're anonymous. So if you contact myself and Tom today, and you've been abducted, and what you really are looking for, not only to tell your story, but you're looking for support, we'll get you support starting tomorrow. Not next week or next month. You don't have to wait for this group to get off the ground. So I encourage people to challenge what you and I are talking about on this podcast, because that's how we're gonna gather the data that we need to get to the truth. Because if we wait for the government, a lot of us are going to miss the boat, I think, because the government's not rushing out to tell us anything.
No, they're not. They're not at all.
No.
I mean,
yeah.
And if you're way up in northern Maine, I know another support group way up there. So, I mean, we know support groups, and Mike knows other support groups, too. So if you don't have to worry about coming down to southern New Hampshire or northern Massachusetts if you live, even in Ohio or, in England. We'll find your support group in your area. So if you want to do that, you're more than welcome to reach out to us, because we do have support groups in other areas of the country, too. So you don't have to
this is just like...
Yeah,
this is just like things you and I have experienced over 25 years when people have a spiritual or a spirit type experience. The first thing that happens is they have few people they can tell,
right,
because they're afraid of criticism. Unfortunately, in the world of ghosts and spirits and mediums and everything else, there aren't a lot of support groups around for that type of thing.
No.
There is for the UFO part of it. So to me, again, what our group is looking for is not to move into a MUFON environment, but to move into an environment that we can start to track data and help people that have had either abductions, visitations, whatever, or observations, so that you've got a place to tell your story. And we can educate them on how then to document that. Mm-hmm. I mean, those are the key points to this, to make this start to march towards the truth, in my opinion.
No, you're right about that. And what I find, very interesting. Now, as you know, Bob, you and I have been on the circuit a while. Around, at least up here in the Merrimack Valley in southern New Hampshire, right? Doing library talks, this, that, and the other thing. Remember, quite a few years ago, we brought the guy down to downtown Havel. I can't remember his name. UFO guy had his own national show.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. What was his name?
I can't remember his name now. But
no, I remember the guy, though.
Right. Here's the reason I brought it up. So we're on the circuit. We have friends that speak at different events. And usually you can film most paranormal talks at a library, okay? The library don't care.
Right.
It's up to the speaker. And if the speaker's selling books, or even if they're not, they like to be on, little extra people watching you on TV. And today, with the internet, the public access stations have their own YouTube. So now all of a sudden you're out on YouTube. And once you're on YouTube, you're in the world. In reality, let's face it. I have never been turned down to shoot before. I've shot my own talks, like at the Havel Public Library, because HC Media needed some help that night, and they just couldn't get anybody, so I shot my own talk. Nobody came. Yep. But remember the night we were going to shoot that UFO talk? They were vehemently against it because people come in and want to talk about UFOs and don't want to be on TV. That was interesting. Right. That was an education for me. That was over 10, 15, that'll be over 10 years ago now, at least, if not longer. But they don't care about talking about UFOs because they see the cameras are running. When the questions are asked, I tell everybody, the libraries will say, hey, this station is filming at our local public access station or one of the neighboring communities, and when it's up, we'll let you know so you can watch it. We'll put it out on our Facebook page now, and then you can go click on it and rewatch the show if you want to. Or send it to your friend because you had fun that night. Your friend missed it. You wanted them to see it. But when we bring UFO people in, unless it's like a Mike Stevens or something, more than not, it's been hard getting UFO people actually on the show.
Right.
I mean, we've had a few. We're going to have to bring a couple of them back, but we've had a few, but it's not easy to get them. So it's like UFO is more taboo than the paranormal.
Oh, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. It's and the people that, man, like I said, there's only been 2 or 3 over the last 2 years that I still in contact with. Some of at least one of these people have not even told their spouse these stories, and it's interesting because again, as investigators, you have to deep dive into questions to get a response that necessarily doesn't come from the person, but makes sense. In one case, this individual was abducted at 3:00 in the morning, gone from their home for 2 hours. And the first question I asked was, well, let me ask your husband a question. This happens. Were you concerned? I mean, I think all of us with spouses and so forth, that they, disappear at 3:00 in the morning out of our bedrooms for a couple, 3 hours, that we're aware of that. This particular individual was not aware, didn't even know it happened. Now, at face value, Tom, you would say, that's suspicious. But what if these beings, these aliens, have a way to put a witness into a trance?
Right.
Why do we not believe that's possible? If we believe they can come through a wormhole and travel, if we traveled, it would take us 8 years to travel the same thing they travel in 2.5 minutes.
Correct.
Okay, so if they can travel through a wormhole thousands of miles in 2.5 minutes, why would we think they don't have the ability to put a witness into a state of animation? Now, I'm not proposing that. I'm just saying this is what we've got to find. So, again, go back to our strategy here. If we had 30 cases like this and 15, 16 of them, the spouse or the partner, whatever the case might be, had no knowledge of their partner, spouse being gone for 2 to 3 hours, then couldn't we make the small little quantum leap, they'll call it, to say they have a way to put that witness into a trance?
Mm-hmm.
Is that like way out there? I don't think so.
No, it isn't. It's not out there at all.
But what we need is the data to check that. That's going to be the answer. it'll be in the data. And by the way, I don't think you and I should release his name yet, but we're working with somebody in Massachusetts that has an extremely large database of reported UFO, either observations, visitations, or abductions. And that will probably be a good starting point for us. Now, we've got to go through a lot of hoops, Tom, right, to contact these people, because he needs to contact them first and make sure that they're willing to talk to us.
Right.
But this is the kind of database and data that we need to start to cross-check.
No, that's accurate. That is extremely accurate, because that's where we're going to find what we need to find.
Yeah, we're going to find answers, I think. Yes. We're really going to find answers. And I think that we may be surprised at, because there's always this underlining factor, this black curtain, if you will, that aliens are dangerous, aliens are here to harm us, they're here to take over the race. I mean, we've heard all this stuff over the years. What was Orson Welles? What was that? Invasion of the World, or the Wars of the World,
War
or something.
Of the Worlds. Oh, let me give a little plug to somebody who's friends of this show.
Okay.
On Halloween night, not only is Essex County going to have a 2-hour live show that you'll be able to see on YouTube page and everywhere else, but after the 2-hour live show is done, right at 8 o'clock, War of the Worlds will be on WHAV.net.
Oh, wow. You got to listen to that.
The original War of the Worlds. Or if you're in the area, you just put on WHAV in your car radio, and you can listen to it. I listen to it. I actually put my Halloween special on around WHAV.
Wow.
They have the license to run the original War of the Worlds. They do it at 8, and they do it, I believe it's 11 o'clock. Don't quote me on the second one, but they run them back-to-back.
Yeah, how cool is that, huh?
Yeah, that is cool.
For our younger listeners that don't know what we're talking about, Orson Welles, way back then, was an entertainer, a talk show host, and did a great job and that type of thing. One day he put on a show about UFOs, and I'm not going to give you the punchline here because I want you to listen to it. But it caused chaos because you have to listen to this from this perspective. People didn't have TVs back then. They didn't have the internet back then. So you need to step back in time and think, what would I do if I only had a radio? Because that's all people had back there, right? They didn't have breaking news. They didn't have, internet. They didn't have all of these apps.
Right. And
hear this. Yeah.
The other thing, Bob, is, let me make sure the people know this. Back then, you might there's 10 or 12 local radio stations, 15 radio stations. But if you're out in the middle of nowhere in New England, Massachusetts, or Maine, in some small city or town, very small town, you might only get one radio station. So you can't even check it with another radio station.
No, that's correct. And frankly, after the 5 o'clock dinner, which you were forced to sit around and eat, that's what families did back then. Most people today wouldn't believe that, but that's what families did. They sat around the radio and listened to, but as you point out very well, Tom, 1-2 stations at tops, either music or this. But Orson Welles, anyways, I'm so delighted to hear you putting that on, because any of our listeners right now, you have to get that information and listen to that. It's being talked about hundreds of years later almost. So it was unbelievable. Unbelievable. So tune into Tom's program and hear that. Tell our listeners where they can get it again.
That's actually not my program. That is WHAV.net, which has nothing to do. They actually broadcast their radio station through our public access station. But you go to WHAV.net, and you can listen to What Changed Radio, because after that, they really got strict with radio. The rules changed. Okay. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
But WHAV.net, 8 o'clock on Halloween night. And prior to that, Lawrence Community Access TV, Bill Ricker Public Access TV, and HC Media will be covering live the Paranormal News Hour, which will be a 2+ hour event that night, live from Lawrence Community Access TV, put on by Essex Sound. We'll talk UFO, Bigfoot, and everything else, but I'm not going to give away the Orson Welles thing, but trust me, this is worth listening to. And you're going to hear it.
It really is.
You're going to hear it now. If you're listening to this, let me just warn you. Okay, and there's going to be warnings now because of the FCC rules. Don't try to change your dial because it's coming in not clear like satellite radio or radio today. Right. This is the original broadcast that came in with the static and everything else. Remember that
how
when
cool
you're
is
listening
that?
to that. Yes, I cannot wait.
Yeah.
That's my favorite Halloween tradition now, but since WHAV went on air over 10 years ago.
Yeah. Well, let's give our listeners another option. If you didn't get a chance to write this down, or you're driving in your car, or whatever the case might be, send me a request at paranormalnh@yahoo.com, all small letters, all one word, and I'll send you the information so you have it. So if you didn't write it down or you didn't have a pen, whatever the case might be, you're all set. Just send me an email, and I'll give you the dates and the times and everything else. So, because you don't want to miss that. This may be one in a lifetime chance.
Right. I mean, it's great. It is just great, and I cannot wait.
Yeah.
It is going to be awesome that night.
That is so great. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
You know, but back to what we were discussing. I mean, there are sightings all over the place, and I know people are afraid to come out. I mean, most of the time I'm done talking, like last time we talked about UFOs over the Canosa Triangle, okay? I had 4 people stay behind to talk to me, not about UFOs, but about paranormal they've seen in the triangle, in that same area.
Yeah.
You know, without much evidence, but after talking to these people, I believe all 4 people, groups of people that stayed, but nothing about UFOs. And I know in the late 60s, 1968, 69, I forgot the exact date. I don't have my notes with me, so I'm trying to do this out of my head, folks, so sorry about that. There was a UFO sighting over Riverside Drive in Haverhill because I know somebody that was home babysitting their brother, and I heard it from other people that were living in Riverside section of Haverhill more than once. Okay? The day before that, though, this is what makes it interesting. The day before that, in the 1976 bicentennial history book of Methuen, Bridges from the Past, written by now deceased historian Ernie Mack. It's a book that's hard to find. They talked about a UFO sighting on Washington Street, literally like right around the corner from where I live now, okay?
Right.
And where my family is from. They talked about a UFO sighting in the book, but I cannot find any official MUFON sightings from that time over Washington Street. And these people who told Ernie Mack, who was the author of the book, who's now deceased, he'd be 108 years old now if he was alive, 110 years old, told them point blank what they saw. And I got the copy of in my files. I own the book, Bridges from the Past. I was lucky enough to get one years ago from Mr. Mack himself, actually. God rest his soul. He's the one that got me into history. He was an old New England Yankee. Spoke just like that. But that's what I was looking for out of the federal government reports. Stuff like that. I'm hoping as they clear up some of these old reports, they actually keep going up in the numbers. Because I know there was a lot more cited since the 1960s than what they're claiming.
Right. Well, the other thing, too, Tom, is that the Project Blue Book, which, like you, I think was, first put out in the 50s or early 60s, I guess, but that was meant to do what you and I are trying to achieve right now. Project Blue Book was based on the fact that they were willing to take reports from the public about visitations, observations, and so forth, and document them and look into it from a military point of view and a professional point of view, and then report back. All of a sudden, and I'm going through this quickly, but all of a sudden, Blue Book project was terminated and all the documents destroyed.
Right.
And I've often thought, and I'm only thinking this, I'm just wondering this, have no proof, but when they started to read Project Blue Book in its completion, did they then start to realize that there was a common factor between all of these abductions? Okay, was it such that they knew that and they said, we need to shut the project down, we need to destroy the records quickly because we can't have this out there? And I encourage people who listen to our podcast to go Google, pretty simple, Project Blue Book, and you will find plenty of documentation on the project itself and what was in there. So,
no, that's another interest. I mean, the show was interesting.
Yeah.
The idea was interesting. And even some of the stuff, we'll end it with this if you want to before giving out the information again. But even some of the stuff in that, oh God, what was the name of that show back in the 80s I used to watch every so often?
Yeah.
What was the name of that show? They're replaying it now on, the old TV station. But not War of the Worlds. What was the name of the show where the two FBI agents...
X-Files.
X-Files, yes. Those are actually based on... Those cases were based on paranormal and UFO stuff, a lot of them.
Yeah, see, now you're dating me now.
Yeah, I know. Me too.
Because X-Files had to be back in the 60s and 70s.
No. There might have been one back in the 60s and 70s, but it was rebooted in the 80s.
Oh, okay, it was 80s. Okay, I feel better now.
Yeah, it was the 80s. It's on Freeform. I believe it's on Freeform at 10 o'clock at night, to be honest.
Yeah.
They replay the old ones over. It's usually, I think, 10 to 11, 11 to 12 or something, or 9 to 10, 10 to 11, something in that ballpark. Just look it up. But those were actually based on, some of those were loosely based on cases and reports,
Right.
So, I mean, Hollywood created it, that is correct, and they probably added the Hollywood flair, we'll call it, to make it better than what it was, to make it more exciting for people to watch, but they were actually based on stories.
But, when you look at why people today, this is more of a psychological thing, but why do people today that have paranormal experiences feel like coming out quicker than UFO people? And I think the reason is that paranormal experiences have been well publicized over the last 40, 50 years.
Especially the last 20.
Yeah, and there's been, TV shows and everything else. If you look at the UFO experiencers, this really hasn't caught on.
No.
Maybe back to 15, 20 years ago. If you look at the Roswell issue, right? I mean, think about the importance of the Roswell incident, and yet that didn't got a lot of attention, but it happened and died off quickly.
Right, and the other thing that's happened too is, thanks to, and I'm now going to date myself, being 84 years old, what really started this phenomena of UFO paranormal was actually a show called Unsolved Mysteries.
Unsolved Mysteries, you're absolutely
Robert
right.
Stock, and then there was another one.
I was just trying to think of his name, you're right.
Farino was his last name, Farino. Robert Stock one was the best one. That's what got me hooked. But what happened out of that, some of the stuff was UFO. They had the Texas incident there, the big one, Fire in the Sky. The book came out of there, and then they had Lauren Coleman was on all the time talking about Bigfoots in Colorado's Pike Peak, New York, and wherever. They had him on a regular, so that got me hooked. But out of that, the only thing that stuck was really not even the crypto or the UFO stuff, was the paranormal. It got so
Right.
big, then you started with Ghost Hunters and all these other shows.
Correct.
A million of them, and now you've got the Travel Channel that's not even the Travel Channel. They might as well just call that the Paranormal Channel. But the ghost stuff kicked off. The crypto kind of did, but then died. And the UFO never went anywhere until the last 10 years. And that
correct.
I mean, but the paranormal
So that's what I'm saying. I think people, to come out and say they've been abducted, observed, or visited is now just starting to catch on that they feel more comfortable coming out. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think for the last 10 years they've been afraid to come out.
Right.
Just a little tickler, and I don't want to make a commitment I'm not sure is going to happen. But for those of you that are watching Skinwalker Ranch, which I encourage you to Google and find out about, it's a very fascinating investigation, in my opinion. Anyways, we have reached out to the gentleman that heads that up in a text and invited him on this podcast. He did get back to me. He said they're in the throes of putting their season together, and of course he's very, very busy. But they did say if he had the time in the future, he would come on the podcast and talk about it. So, not promising he will, and he's not promising he will, but it's I would be very excited to talk to him because I think Skinwalker Ranch is a great documentary. Right?
No, it is great. But also, too, it just goes to show that the paranormal zone is growing in leaps and bounds. Now we're over. We got a chance of bringing on a national celebrity in the UFO field. I mean, will it happen? We don't know. There's no guarantees in life. I mean, there's no guarantees when you wake up in the morning. When you get up and when you go to bed at night, you're going to wake up in the morning. But it just shows that this show, this podcast, has really taken it to the next level, and we're doing much better than we expected. And it's growing, and it's thanks to our great listeners from from the Essex County all the way up through the counties in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Providence, Rhode Island,
London.
I mean, Ireland, Australia. And before I forget, Bob, I just want to take a quick minute, a real quick minute, a moment of silence for those people down south in Florida, Texas, and with the damage of these hurricanes. It's sad.
Amen.
It really is.
Yeah, amen.
So let's take a quick minute for that. All righty then. Well, Bob, it looks like we're ending another show. Wow. Whew.
Yeah, it's a great one. This was a great one. Yeah.
Yes, this was episode 31. 31 weeks and
wow.
31 full
Congratulations.
Weeks. Congratulations to you too.
Hey, listen, I'm going to close out my portion, but just saying this to our listeners. As my boss, you need to come up with a budget where I could start flying to like London and Ireland, Australia to interview these people before they come on.
Right. Yeah, because that'll be fun, wouldn't it?
Now you said right. So does that mean that the budget's in the works or no? Okay. Tommy, thank you so much. It's been a great show,
Bob.
Bill.
Thank you, Bob.
Look forward to seeing you soon.
See you this weekend. Saturday night, actually. All right.
There you go.
All right. I want to close the show by saying thank you, everybody listening around the world, the universe. Prayers to the people down south in Florida, Texas, and Virginia, I believe, was the other place that got hit hard. But I want to thank Bob. Bob, that was a great show we did today on the
thanks. Thank you.
On UFOs and the extension of Essex County into the ufology field. That's going to help immensely. I hope everybody enjoyed this show. I want to thank you all. We'll see you Saturday night at the haunted Sandown train station. Thank you very much, and good night. I'm heading back to the crypt.